There was a bite in the air this London morning as the autumn sun did its best to warm the quiet streets. Crossing the threshold into the Royal Courts of Justice and on towards the dubiously named Court of Protection, protecting who exactly? That bite inside the cavernous and imposing central hall became positively arctic. Far off, in the distance, stood a family huddled together like lost children in a giant's playroom, stooped in grief, awaiting an appeal for their right to speak their beautiful daughter's words in public for the first time. I want everyone to know. I want everyone to know what is happening. These are the words of their daughter, Sudiksha Thirumalesh. For those who haven't heard, Sudiksha was put on a pathway to death by her doctors, despite being assessed as fully conscious and sentient by two separate psychiatrists, dragged, weak, and in the last precious moments of life, into legal proceedings by her local NHS trust, hell-bent on finishing her off as soon as possible. The judge sided with the trust, saying that she was clearly delusional because she inconveniently insisted that she wanted to die trying to live. In addition to this horror, the imposition of an Orwellian transparency order, correctly defined as a gagging order, meant that a family who should have been home with their loved ones mourning the loss of their daughter were instead in this cold, austere building for one last chance to remove the gag wrapped suffocatingly around their mouths and the mouths of how many other families on a blanket basis to protect our NHS. The reasoning for this order was ostensibly to stop harassment of any clinicians involved, despite none having aired any concerns directly, but more obviously it exists to protect the NHS from real scrutiny and genuine accountability. I must confess, as I saw the NHS Trust's not insignificantly small legal team shuffle into court, one could be forgiven for asking in a time of such great financial need in the health service how much this affair had cost the taxpayer from start to finish, and why they are still trying to silence Sudiksha, even as the poor girl lies dead and gone, and why a serenely dignified yet broken mother is weeping once again before a cold and clinical courtroom for the most fundamental of freedoms. First, denied the freedom for a chance at more life, and now denied the freedom to speak about it. Unnecessary, evil, and profoundly cruel. After submissions from both sides and from the press about the damage done to trust when such draconian reporting restrictions are placed upon families, the judge ruled that they could finally say their own daughter's name, Yippee. There are other aspects to this case I'm sure will come to light in time which may well reveal the more sinister reasons why the NHS Trust fought so hard to silence the family. But guess what? They're subject to a transparency order as well. We live in a post-Christian world. Dwindling congregations of followers search for dwindling places of worship. So many have turned their back on God only to prostrate themselves at the feet of the diversity demons. This is nothing new, but even the ethical standards of Judeo-Christian societies are fast disappearing and becoming ever fainter echoes of a time when life was more precious and more outwardly meaningful, rooted in duty and courage rather than succumbing to the unending modern inward reflections of narcissistic personal identity. The courts are woefully unequipped to deal with society's rudderless morality, devoid of even the shadows of a higher authority falling upon the fallen, choosing instead to impose lock and key restrictions on reporting in the family court and the Court of Protection. One wonders, well, I don't actually, how many more families and parents are silenced and superseded by judges in the name of protection. What other evils, and no, that isn't too strong a word, are muffled and blanketed by unchecked and nihilistic paternalism. In this inverted world, where free speech is under threat like never before and cases are tried and sentenced in the media, where due process is flung out with the trash aided by sneaking party members and their billet doux to cancellation, in the courts, silence reigns. Perhaps it might be time for us to reflect on how quickly the foundations of society are crumbling beneath us like cheap concrete, and what, if anything, we would like to do about it. Should we be asking ourselves whether we want to be a nation attached to a failing health service or whether we wish to be a nation with a functioning health service attached to it? Should we be asking ourselves whether justice muted in the secret dark is any justice at all? Sudikshka's brave family have put this round of egregious wrongs right, but more secret battles lie ahead for them. We can only hope that they finally have the beginnings of closure, to mourn their beautiful daughter openly, to share photos of her last birthday in hospital, treasured memories, finally released from the locked box of man's imperfect justice, time to organise a funeral, to say goodbye, instead of being terrified of breaking the laughably titled transparency order for doing so. Time and time again, throughout the hearing, came the voice of a broken family speaking as one. As all too often happens in cases of such extreme circumstance, it is the same cry. May what we have suffered and what we have been put through never ever happen to another family again. And I will leave you with the words of Sudikshka's brother Varshan, his shaking hands clenched tightly around the family statement as he composed himself to say, "We are deeply concerned how we have been treated by the hospital trust and the courts. We have been gagged, silenced, and most importantly, prevented from accessing specialist treatment abroad. We did not look for this fight. This fight came to us from a system that too readily gives up on life. We were brutally silenced, intimidated, and taken to court in our hour of need."